looking at stage 14 from Saturday, they went through the Massif Centrale there in the southern portion of France. Kind of interesting, France has the Massif Centrale, which is kind of a high plateau with deep set canyons. And when they colonized Indochina, Laos, and Vietnam, there in Vietnam was the Central Highlands, which is sort of a plateau. So, kind of interesting where the French colonized has an area that's very similar to their home country there with the Central Highlands of Vietnam and Laos. Maybe a coincidence, I don't know. So, stage 14, they left the start point and there was some wind. So, immediately the front side of the peloton went balls out and they created a big gap. So, the peloton actually broke up after they were strung out into a long line of single riders. It fractured into groups, 4 different groups. This is the thing that's kind of interesting. Why would the team director not have scouted the area immediately out of the start point, discovered that there's wind, and made sure that their riders were ready to be on the front of the peloton? Did they do that and they just couldn't get to the front of the peloton? It doesn't seem plausible because the road is wide enough for riders to maneuver, and it didn't happen until, say, 5 to 10 kilometers into the stage. So there was time to move up and get a position. Did they try to do it and just too many riders try to get up there? You would think if that was the case, then the front side would not have bothered doing that big pace setting to try to get it strung out and then try to get it cracked. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. The other thing I'm curious about is, why would you not have the people that stand on the side of the road 50 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 80 kilometers, whatever, down into the stage? Why would they also not just pick up their cell phone, their mobile phone, call back to the team director and say, hey, you know, it might be calm there at the beginning, but I'm out here 50 kilometers, 80 kilometers into the stage. And guess what? In the last half hour, the winds have really picked up. So you might prep your riders, the team, to be ready. I don't know. It just seems strange to me. Team Sky, they had their shit together. They were on the front of the peloton. So when it went balls out and it strung out and then fractured, they made sure they were in that front peloton ahead of the other 3 groups. Dumoulin was also in the front peloton. So I think 2 things happened then. One, they got out of the flat area that was exposed to the crosswinds. And 2, there was still a long way of the stage to go. And then 3, Dumoulin was in there with them. And Dumoulin is in third. So if anything, they would have just helped Dumoulin go right there with Thomas and Froome, which doesn't help them. And it would have just put the other people further behind. But they're not really necessarily concerned about people in 5th, 6th, 7th place because they're already 3-4 minutes plus back. Also, though, I think overall, Sky just did not want to ride balls out for that much. So really, it was more just to create the old sphincter pucker factor and kind of assert their dominance to say, we're Team Sky, we're number 1, we're going to pimp slap you all down. Okay, so it was kind of interesting too. Once they decided to do that, they rode, at one point you see on the TV, on the coverage, all Team Sky is riding side by side to block off the whole road. And at that point, the road was pretty narrow. It was about 8 or 10 or 15 kilometers after this big, crazy ride in the wind, and they just shut it down. So even if you wanted to try to get by them, good luck. They're blocking off the whole front of the peloton. So that allowed the other 3 fractured peloton groups to catch up and make it one big happy family. While all that was going on, Sky was managing who they would let go off the front. So typical, Thomas de Gendt got out there, Peter Sagan got out there, Daryl Impey got out there, quite a few riders. There were about 30, 40 plus riders at one point that were allowed to get away into the breakaway because Sky could care less. They're all 30, 40 minutes, an hour plus down on the GC. Chavanel was out there. Philippe Gilbert was out there. Alaphilippe, Peter Sagan, Daryl Impey, Van Avermaet was out there. Comagene, the French guy. Frele was out there from Astana. So pretty much this is how it went for the whole stage. You have 30, 40 plus riders out there in the breakaway, including Alaphilippe and Peter Sagan. Sky is riding a somewhat casual pace along with the rest of the peloton, and the gap got huge. Near the latter quarter of the stage, the gap was up 15, 16, 17 minutes. So pretty casual ride from that point from the peloton. What's kind of interesting is as they hit the last climbs, some of the riders said bullshit on this. This guy, Stuvan, he sort of said, I'm done with this. He decided to pick up the pace along with a few others. Izagirre, I believe is his name. They picked up the pace too. So that started to put pressure on that 30 plus riders in the breakaway. So even Peter Sagan getting dropped. Most of them getting dropped. Van Avermaet fighting like hell to stay on the front of that breakaway group, but he was falling back. Eventually, you had just 3 riders out of that 30 plus out in front that got away on their own. Stuvan is like a power rider. When you see him next to Alaphilippe, picture a little old Alaphilippe, little skinny guy, maybe 135 pounds, and then here's Stuvan, an inch taller, 3 inches wider in the chest, shoulders 3-4 inches wider, and let's say easily 20-30 pounds heavier. So he's driving. He's more of a power rider. So out of the 3 in that breakaway, no one is necessarily wanting to share the workload. Stuvan don't care. He's just saying, I'm going for it. So 30, 35, 40 kilometers from the finish, he starts to pick up the pace. The other 2 guys with him, they're kind of looking at each other. I don't want to do the work. Well, screw you. I don't want to do the work. No, screw you. You do the work. I'll pace off of you. I don't want to help you get to the finish and then lose to you. Meanwhile, Stuvan just says, screw you guys. He goes. He drops them all. Stuvan, he's doing the solo ride. He's going pure power ride. He's doing 50 kilometers an hour, 55 kilometers an hour. So dude's doing 30 plus miles an hour. He's just driving. He's going for it. The other 2 realize, oh shit, we may have just lost our chance. They try to chase. But meanwhile, they essentially get absorbed back into the remnants of that front group. And that's kind of bringing Calmejean back. That's bringing Peter Sagan back. Alaphilippe is back. Thomas de Gendt is back. All those guys are then coming back. So you have Stuvan out in front by about a minute, minute 20, minute 30, minute 40, just driving and driving right towards the finish line. As they get to the bottom of this final climb. So this final climb is about 3 kilometers. So you got 1.8, 1.9 miles. Average gradient is about 10% incline, but it kicks up to 12, 12.5, 13%. So very steep in this 1.8 to 2 mile climb, basically. And there's always that catch-22 when you think about this game in the breakaway. You want people to help pace you to the finish. You want people to help do the work. You want people to help give you some slipstream to help save your energy. But do you want to bring somebody to the finish that then beats you? Stuvan, I can appreciate it. He said, screw all this. I'm going on my own. But is it going to come back and bite him in the ass? At the base of the final climb, Stuvan has about a minute 30, minute 40 buffer. De Gendt attacks. And not soon after, or soon after De Gendt attacks, Frele from Team Astana, he goes out and catches up and is on his wheel. Caruso also jumps out after Frele. And in the meantime, Sagan is in this group, so is Alaphilippe. Frele catches De Gendt and basically jumps past him. So you got Stuvan out in front, and he's got about a minute 20. You got Frele chasing. Let's say, he's a minute 10, minute 5. And then 15, 20, 30 seconds back, you got most of the core that's now being strung out. You got the remnant of De Gendt. You got the remnant of Caruso. Meanwhile, you got Sagan at the back, and Alaphilippe is near the front of this little chase group that's kind of strung out. Frele gets himself to about a minute 7 back, while the rest are about a minute 20 back. So Frele is gapping from the rest. Alaphilippe is not going. So Alaphilippe must have some mental clock going off in his mind, thinking, I either need to get my heart rate down a bit, or I need to wait till I've eaten away a little bit more of this climb before I go out on the attack. The thing is, you wait too long, can you make the closure and then have enough to get by and get to the finish? So here's the thing. At the top of this 1.8, 1.9 mile climb, there's about a 1.5 kilometer run in that's basically flat and a little downhill. So whoever is first over the top of this climb, let's say they need 5 to 7 to 10-second buffer to ensure that they don't get caught in that last kilometer plus into the finish line. Frele, at a really steep section, Stuyven starts to die. It's 12-13% gradient, and they're about a kilometer and a half from the top of the climb. Frele has the gap to Stuyven at 57 seconds. Then it's down to 45 seconds. Sagan's still at the back of that core. So you have Frele at about 45 seconds, and then you have Alaphilippe back about 33 seconds. Alaphilippe finally decides to go for it, a kilometer or so from the top. And he's got a bridge 25 seconds to Frele, and Frele is almost on top of Stuyven. Frele catches Stuyven like 500-600 meters from the top. So poor Stuyven. Oh, shit, it must be so freaking frustrating to just be that gassed at the end. And that's not really his strength. He's more of the big, heavier power rider, more of a classics rider, more of a tour rider that can just gut it out and ride 60, 70, 80 miles on rolling terrain, where Frele was kicking it in the ass and he was just feeling better. He definitely planned it out. Frele is trying to get himself that buffer over the top. Alaphilippe catches up to Stuyven literally about 100 meters from the top. And they can see Frele pulling away from him as he's already crested and is going down that last kilometer and a half. Sorry, they don't catch him. Brilliant ride by Frele. Brilliant timing. Alaphilippe, seemingly, you waited too long, dude. And he's got to be kicking himself, because how much more energy would he have expended if he had jumped out 30 seconds, a minute sooner? And the way he caught Stuyven, he definitely would have passed Stuyven with more like 400 or 500 meters to go, which means he might have been able to catch Frele, or he might have just gone over the crest 3-4 seconds behind Frele, and then maybe he can catch him. But Frele knew what he was doing. He gutted it out, and he did a power ride through that flat right to the finish. Okay, on to the GC contenders. I'll give you a little spoiler right now, not much. This is a stage from Saturday anyway. Clearly, Froome, Thomas, and Dumoulin are the strongest. They get to the bottom of the mountain. Poor frickin' Dan Martin. This is what I say with the shit luck. The gods don't want this guy to win. Unfortunately, they're all at top performance. The gaps are 10 to 30 seconds to a minute or so. But Dan Martin, potential to be top 5, top 10 for sure. A legitimate top 10 with a chance to move up. The poor bastard gets a puncture 5 kilometers from the finish before they even hit the climb. So he's completely screwed. He's done. Sorry, my friend. Okay, so the core group of the GC going up this final climb, about a kilometer into it or so, half a kilometer in, Landa goes for it. He gets no real gap. They bring him right back. Roglic goes for it. He does get a little gap. He gets himself 5, 6, 7 seconds ahead. They can't close on him. Valverde and Landa are going off the back of that little core group. Kruijswijk, Bardet, Quintana, Thomas, Froome, and Dumoulin are still in there, still hanging. Dumoulin starts to go off the back. Not as bad as Valverde and Landa, but he's back a bit. But the dude, either he finds that second wind, he gets that comfort zone, and he starts chugging back. Dumoulin gets back, then Dumoulin starts pushing it, and he actually starts to drop Thomas and Quintana and Kruijswijk and Froome and Bardet, but then all but Bardet get back on Dumoulin, and they're riding right there with him. So you are starting to see. So Bardet, a little bit of problem on these really steep kicks. Maybe this is going to come back to haunt him on some of these Pyrenees sections that get really steep. Dumoulin also can get gapped on these really steep kicks. But unlike Bardet, he's more of just that diesel engine that can chug and chug and chug. Bardet, more the small kicks, and then he's just got to pace himself. But impressive, Quintana hung in there, but Quintana's not making up any time. So now is it going to just be where Quintana maintains and he doesn't really move up, but he doesn't really lose time? Bardet and that Kruijswijk, they are dropped a bit. Quintana still sort of hanging in, but it's Froome, Thomas, and Dumoulin going after Roglic, who's his 5, 6, 7 seconds ahead. Thomas and Froome counter. They kind of drop Dumoulin. Dumoulin gets back there. Like I said, clearly the strongest riders, the most consistent riders, Thomas, Froome, and Dumoulin. You can kind of see here, I don't know how it's going to play out, but here's your GCs. It's kind of starting to solidify. You got Thomas in yellow, of course. Froome, a plus 39 still. Dumoulin, a plus 150 still. Roglic moved himself up a bit, plus 238. Bardet plus 321, he lost a bit of time. Landa plus 342, he lost a little bit of time. Kruijswijk plus 357, of course, lost a little bit of time. Quintana plus 423, Fuglsang plus 614, and Dan Martin plus 654. So let's scratch Dan Martin. He lost himself another minute 30 or so because of the puncture. That sucks bad. Fuglsang plus 614. Unless these guys in front of him completely crash and burn and lose 2-3 minutes on a stage and he rides really well, how much can he move up? Even Quintana, they're at plus 423. He's not too far behind Kruijswijk, but he is a good 50 or so seconds behind Landa. Now, if Landa sort of has a weak day and Quintana continues to just kind of do his consistent thing, he could potentially move up. Bardet, 321. He's kind of on that edge. He's in 4th place. But even Bardet, he needs Roglic, Dumoulin, and Froome to have a terrible, terrible day where they lose a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 2+ minutes while he rides strong. And the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about now for people to start jockeying, you figure the first day in the Pyrenees or for sure the second day in the Pyrenees is probably it. Because by that third day in the Pyrenees, they're all going to be exhausted. Even if somebody was holding back a little bit, if they're holding back, that means they haven't been gaining time or they've even been losing time in the stage 16 and stage 17. So you've got two choices basically. You either look to be very aggressive right out of the chute in stage 16 and gain time, and then just maintain in stage 17 and then maybe try again in stage 18. The problem is Froome and Thomas and Dumoulin could be, of course, are thinking the same thing. They want to protect their gaps or get even better gaps. And then you always run that risk that on one day you ride really well, where let's say as a Landa, you lose time to your teammate Quintana or you lose time to Bardet, but then the next day, it's Bardet that has a bad day and he loses himself 20 or 30 or 40 seconds. So the only key moving forward now is you either have to ride strong and gain time and or just maintain and hold your place. And then the worst case is you're going to lose a shitload of time if you have a really bad day and you do like an Adam Yates and you get yourself dehydrated and then you frickin' crack and you lose 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes plus. All right, on to the next stage.